where like men of my generation are like, where do we go? Like, I don't feel like it's safe to be in my power.
That is softening against your skin. Sometimes she is a fucking typhoon, right? And you trying to control the typhoon is a losing cause. You will lose every time. Every time man tries to control nature, nature finds a way through.
Amir Khalighi, thank you for joining me on the Evolving Man podcast. It's good to have you here.
It's my pleasure to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
So let's start with what work are you doing right now with men and why?
Well, I guess what I do could be characterized as men's work. And we could talk about what that even means. I mean, the word men's work floats around often. My definition would be any space where men can feel safe enough to do some deep introspective work in giving them the opportunity to drop the things that no longer serve them so they can have a clear palette in creating their own life from that heart space would be something I would identify as men's work.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone has a different flavor on how they go into that work. So if you're asking what my flavor is, embodiment, somatic, and shamanic would be the three different flavors that I use to support and help men, guide men to certain areas and crevices within themselves, within the unconscious, to help release with some loving support in that exploration of self. All of this really is designed to free men. And in my personal thought is that men really, what they're really looking for is a deeper connection to self and the natural world. That is the element that's really missing from the nourishment of men's bodies and nervous systems. They are run dry. They've been sold a bill of goods about what they need in order to be happy. And and really what they've turned into are batteries. they're
Right.
just they're just
Machines.
generating machines. They're just generating. And there's shame around not generating. So in my space, you'll often find spaces of nourishment. You'll find talk of receptivity. You'll talk, about strengthening the capacity for receptivity, bringing consciousness to how do we even reconnect to what receiving means. So that's some of the flavors of what you'll experience in my space and in the work that I do in the world.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, it's quieting, it's dropping, it's connecting. And I found myself asking, well, who is this work for? And I think you really spoke to that, which is that you're not working with men who are, quote, sick, or men who, like there's not a sector of the population that badly needs this work. You're working with all men and any men who are willing to step into a space with you, step into a circle with you.
Yeah, and I think generally teachers, we bring offerings hopefully from a place of recovery around our own wounds and healings. That what we have overcome is the food that we offer, right?
Uh-huh.
So a a good portion, and not all of the men, but a good portion of the men that I seem to draw to myself are men that have had either wounding from the father, missing fathers, no strong uh, masculine figures in their lives that they could relax into.
Mm-hmm.
So as a result, one of the programs I run is sort of an initiation into breaking that mold that needs to be broken, right? Because boys that are not initiated really think that life revolves around them.
Right.
And when they are woken to something greater and then welcomed into a community of men that
Mhm.
are living lives for something greater than themselves, um, that paradigm shift begins to happen.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
yeah,
There's a yeah, like what I hear you saying is that one of the consequences of the wounding, abandonment of the father, or a lack of a strong male pillar, is you actually end up with a very self-centered sort of, not a mindset, but a way of being in the world. It is almost like your heart is hurt, or some part of you is hurt, and so you're sort of closed in on that, and you're constantly trying to take care of yourself, self-manage
yeah,
your feelings, your pain, etc. And what happens in an initiation process is you there's like a safety and a challenge in it that is something we need so badly as men, that we don't even know that we're craving. And when that's given to you, there's an opening where you are able to see outside yourself, and
yeah.
your gifts are in a way like unlocked, and you can give back
Mhm.
to the world, and you step into service. And that is one of the marks of a mature man.
Yeah, I mean, what you see is, first and foremost, when you have male figures in community that are present for the community, whether the community is you know, what as a small family or a large community, the presence of men that are not running in that paradigm, that have that sense of interconnectedness to themselves and beyond, right, and live a life sort of for something greater. And greater doesn't have to always necessarily mean the divine, or it certainly could, for within
Mhm.
my case it does, but it could be the well-being of the community as a larger entity. This presence of men, by their simple presence, helps self-regulate boys.
Uh-huh.
Boys learn how to regulate energy that runs through them, right? um, in Iron John, I'm sure you've
Yeah.
read Robert Bly's book.
Mhm.
There's the red knight, the white knight, and the black knight. The red knight represents this beautiful, powerful energy that runs through the youth. They just don't know what to do with it. They don't know how to work with it. They don't know how to be with it. So what happens is it becomes destructive, right? I think um, there's a really beautiful African proverb about, like, teach a boy how to work with fire, otherwise he'll burn the village.
Right.
So um, in red, they're learning how to work with this energy. In white, men are have good intentions in carrying out what they're here to do, but they're still running from shadow states that they may not be conscious to.
Mhm.
And then in black, you face and turn each and every shadow, and you actually eat the shadow. You integrate the shadow into yourself, right? So it really becomes about not living a life propelled from unconsciousness and from these shadows that could be driving the bus,
Mhm.
right? And archetypal work is a really great tool to get a deeper understanding of this. King, Warrior, Magician, Lover, many men's groups now use that book as a
Yeah.
template, to look at these archetypal energies that run through the masculine, that if they are not fully expressed or in alignment to something greater, they go into these shadow states.
Mhm.
And that's a
Mhm.
really great way to bring some clarity around men's work, shadow work, and so on. At the end of the day, we are talking about interconnectedness and a sense of fulfillment in living a life that maybe felt before like not worth living, a sense of isolation, aloneness, perpetual association with thinking. These are all the fruits of a society that doesn't nurture uh, the evolution and the empowerment of the masculine, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because for a long time, uh, that energy, masculine energy, or any sort of it has been also aligned with destruction and pain and
Mm-hmm.
self-service, being serving the self. So men have this have a tendency to refrain from stepping into their power. So we create spaces for men to feel safe in exploring what it means to step into power. How can you start to work with power that is not destructive, that is not self-serving, that it could serve a higher good, and
Mm-hmm.
allow that to work through you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there was a, certainly a few decades, maybe a few centuries, where uh, men in power, men largely were in power, and my grandfather's generation and the generation before him uh, went through the hardest time in human history, modern human history, with two world wars, the whole world smashing into each other and killing each other. And there was a lot of trauma there. And, in the fallout of that, in the generations after that, there was everyone's carrying the trauma, and but people start to see that this way isn't working, and the sort of shadow, the tyrant king, and the sadist uh, start to be cleansed, or tried. We're attempting to push those things out, right, as a culture. And what comes
Hmm.
in is the weakling king,
Hmm.
and a little bit of the
Yeah.
masochist. Like a lot of a lot of men in my dad's generation were nice guys, and
Hmm.
were very apologetic for the generation before them, right?
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
in a way, I just see how it takes generations to really shift a culture, and so from that place where you have men really sort of softening, and uh, I don't know if the word is ceding, but giving over more power to the feminine, there's this shift happening where, like, men of my generation are like, where do we go? Like, I don't feel like it's safe to be in my power, and
Yeah.
what do I do? And so you're creating these spaces, and John's creating these spaces, and I'm trying to create these spaces where men can go to find that center line, that
Hmm.
conscious line of not the tyrant king, not the weakling king, but the conscious king, which is
Hmm.
what you were describing about a man who kids and the people around him just sort of feel energetically like this guy is dependable, reliable, trustable. My
Hmm.
energy calms when I'm around him.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
uh, the other thing that we're saying here is that isn't just something that a guy is born with and that he ends up there. It's something that is honed and sharpened and worked on, and that every man has that king energy inside of him.
Yeah.
But it takes work to reveal that.
Hmm. To him through and hope through this initiation process, and different cultures have different ways of doing that.
Mhm.
I also think it's really important to realize that we are working within a paradigm uh, of patriarchy, that is really um, like even when we say we give power to like
Yeah.
we give power to the feminine, right? We actually I know that it seems that way, but she already has all the power. It is more about being able to be with that power. So um, when man becomes, and I talk a lot about this, when man becomes disconnected from himself and the natural world, that power starts to become threatening to him. And that's why you can see a lot of religions demonize women. They subjugate them. They try to, cut off their clitorises, put burqas on them, pass laws to like control their behavior. This is all out of fear. This has to do with the fact that our counterparts are actually the powerful ones. Like, if you want to talk about true power, we're talking about the capacity to to be a regenerative source of creation through the physical body. Like, they are the portal between the two worlds. That type of power that runs through the feminine used to be revered and awed before patriarchy, which started about 3,500 years BCE till this to today. Prior to that, for thousands and thousands and thousands of years, we were in a matriarchal system where we revered and sat in awe of that power, right? So I think part of men's work is also becoming aware of that old paradigm. This is in my philosophy. It may resonate for some, may not for others. But the way we relate to the feminine um, has to be part of our work,
Hmm.
you know. And that same sense of safety that that young boy feels from that resonance of that man, the feminine also feels,
Hmm.
and feels free to express herself in any way that she wants,
Hmm.
that won't throw that man off keel, that won't crumble him, that won't be like, fuck, she's too much.
Uh-huh.
It's not that she's too much. Your container is not able to hold who she is.
Yeah.
So we work on deepening the capacity of that container to hold larger and larger amounts of energy without collapsing or the nervous system fizzling out. Because the
Uh-huh.
feminine is really the expression of nature herself. Sometimes she's the sunshine that is softening against your skin. Sometimes she is a fucking typhoon,
Yep.
right? And you trying to control the typhoon is a losing cause. You will lose every time. Every time man tries to control nature, nature finds a way through.
Uh-huh.
So I think it's really important in men's work to really have a deeper, not just understanding, but ultimately reverence for our counterparts.
Hmm. And how do men do that work? I think you made that really clear that um, in men's work, we aren't we are doing our own work as men, but we are also doing that in preparation and in relation to the feminine outside of us and also inside of us,
Hmm.
because we all have feminine essence inside of us. We may have a
Yeah,
more dominant masculine essence, but it's
it's a great
inside and
question.
outside.
Yeah. So in my practice space, in the space where we practice regularly, so I meet with men from around the country, uh, regular every Wednesday we meet, and part of our practices, there's twofold in relation to the feminine. One, the men fall into feminine embodiment practices. the more you become familiar with the landscape of your own feminine terrain in expression, in freedom, the more you will be able to resonate in understanding your counterpart.
Mm.
Okay. So, one, as much as we do masculine embodiment practices, we do feminine embodiment practices. We need to cultivate that relationship so the feminine part of ourselves feels safe to come out, because historically, when young boys and boys and girls, when they're young, they're all in their feminine.
Right.
Their children are in their feminine. Okay, they're all about expression. There's no linearness. There's no structures per se. When boys were beginning to express the femininity within them, what happens in school?
Suppression.
Suppression, shaming, you get made fun of, you get chastised, you get ridiculed,
Yep.
you get cut down.
Hmm.
And that becomes the template. That becomes, when this feeling wants to come up, this is the result. Don't bring that up. And we have a culture that perpetuates that in the conscious and unconscious collective.
Yep.
So there is this resistance that I have to work with men on giving them permission to come out and play.
Yeah.
Okay. And
Hmm.
we do that through structured practices, feminine embodiment practices. That's
Hmm.
one. Secondly, we work on the capacity to be able to hold larger and larger amounts of energy through masculine practices, while simultaneously keeping this heart space, this center column, incredibly open and receptive to what is coming to it without collapsing. There's
Okay.
various practices that we do to be able to strengthen the roots and the capacity of that container, so more and more light or feminine energy can enter it without it collapsing, without it,
Hmm.
you know, so these are practices, right? It's not like you go out in the world and your woman starts to talk to you and then you're in like chi generator. Like that's not
Yeah.
how it works, right?
Yeah.
You fall into practice and then you go live your life.
Yeah. An analogy that comes to mind is that um, folks who train in mixed martial arts, some form of martial arts, who are,
Mm-hmm.
they're training in combat, they're very calm outside their dojo, and they're very unreactive because they have trained themselves to be able to withstand
Yes.
a certain amount of impact, certain amount of um, confrontation, that the little things don't tip them off. It takes a lot to
Mm-hmm.
make a jujitsu master lose it in the real world, right? And so I see this as this kind of like energetic relationship training um, that you're doing with men.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you bring up mixed martial arts, Fedor Emelianenko. I mean, when Fedor would walk into a space, I mean, he looked like he was like the meekest,
Yeah,
kindest, and
soft.
obviously
Yeah,
soft, open, available, like present, right?
yep.
Now, his work is a little bit different, right? Like, you know, um, but yes, the same ideology behind strengthening a container. You're absolutely right.
So this idea of you said there's two things that can happen to a guy when he's in a structured masculine practice, when he's being challenged. Uh, the nervous system collapses, or his consciousness fizzles out. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Or he pops out, or
Yeah,
he'll pop out of the moment.
right.
Okay, so let's say I have him. Let's say I have him in a practice. When shit starts to get hard, when the practice starts to elevate in difficulty, his brain starts to talk to him. When is this fucking thing going to be over? Oh my god, I can't believe I came to this. I wish I was like that. No, no, I'm gonna like.
Yep.
So part of the training is becoming conscious to the fact that this is going to do its thing, and it does it. This is not you. You are doing something else. This is here, no problem. So we are
Mm-hmm.
strengthening our capacity to work with our attention. The mind will the mind will kidnap your attention without notice.
Mm.
Without notice, you'll find yourself in thought. So we work on developing our capacity to work with our attention when we want it, like a pencil. We use it when we want it.
Uh-huh.
We work with five instruments when we work with energy in my space. We work with attention, where I'm directing my attention. We work with breath. We work with sound. We work with movement, and we work with visualization. We bring these five instruments into play in navigating this interior world, in working with energies that begin to want to be released. We work with these instruments in creating more space within the body. The more space, the less shit you got in there, the more receptive you're going to be for what is to come.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah. This conversation is just perfectly in alignment. I think if people were to listen to my show in the right order.
Mm,
I had John Wineland on, and then I had Christine Hassler on, and now I'm having you on, and you're touching on many of the same points that John and Christine
that's
talk
interesting.
about.
I'm looking.
Yeah.
I'm going to definitely listen to those.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
very much appreciate the concept of emptying oneself. You know, that really resonates with me from the moment that David Data shared this concept that the masculine seeks this feeling of completion or emptiness, but that
Hmm.
we do it through these ways that don't really fulfill us. Uh,
Hmm.
and what you're sharing, what you're doing with guys, creates the real emptying, this real dropping, uh, to the point where yeah, I feel like I just stepped out of a spiritual dojo. When
Hmm.
I came to one of your circles a couple weeks ago, and we did about a 90-minute physical practice, and it was 75 minutes and some sharing and some connecting afterwards, and it was so nourishing for me. I felt that was an amazing day.
Hmm.
And I felt like I could go to my partner, and however she is, because I
Yeah.
never know, however she is, I'll be able to stand there, eyes wide open, heart open, arms open, ready
Yeah.
for whatever, open.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
Exactly. And
Hmm.
you know, I also work with men in perpetually pushing them to a space of the unknown and reframing that relationship. There's this, like it is in the space of unknown that new creation is constantly bubbling up. You know, we have, our ego wants pathways that it knows, so it feels like safe, right?
Hmm.
In spiritual work, in the type of work that I want to bring out, I want men to feel incredibly comfortable in this space of the unknown, because that's the space of presence. And it is also the space where man has the most opportunity to lean on something greater than himself,
Mm.
right? It is in the
Uh-huh.
unknown that we get to actually lean on something greater than ourselves.
Uh-huh.
It is in the unknown that new information comes, that your attention is more open to new insights. If you know something is happening, and you can almost tune out and miss the bus that comes and goes by.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, no wonder there's a loss of spiritual connection in our modern world, because there's such a predictability to it, right? We've
Yeah.
organized cities and our society there. For the most part, things work really. really well. They work better than they ever have. And
Hmm.
a man can live a very safe, predictable life from birth to death. And you don't need
Yeah.
God in that place, right?
Yeah, I'd rather be in nature and be completely surprised moment to moment. That feels a lot
Uh-huh.
more alive to me
Mm-hmm.
than the promise of. And I'm not, look, I'm not against technology. We're having this beautiful exchange, in different parts of the world, and we're
Yeah.
having a great conversation. So, but there is this, we have to be really cognizant of the fact that we are engaging in a system that is designed to um, own your attention at any cost,
Mm-hmm.
you know, perpetually sending you signals to engage your attention with it. So when you come, when I, part of one, like my 4 month program, one part of it is that you have to spend an hour in silence alone in nature every week.
Uh-huh.
That's like, in addition to other trainings that go into it. But point being is my work is to reconnect men to their deepest part of their hearts, because I truly believe that's where the divine resides. That's where the higher self resides. And if you have that connection, you are going to be free,
Mm-hmm.
because you're not going to be dependent on what you think you need in order to be okay. That's the message that
Yeah.
society gives.
Yeah.
You're going to be okay when you have this, when, or if you do this, or if you look like this, or I'm like, burn all the fucking bridges, burn all the bridges of attachment,
Yeah.
and find yourself free falling in relation to that sense of your understanding of the divine or God or whatever you want. It's there
Mm-hmm.
for it's there for you. And that, in my world view, is intrinsically connected to um, the natural world and our relation to it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I bring an element of animism into my men's work as well.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Well, there, another thing that just came through for me while you were sharing that is the king archetype is also spiritual in nature. Like the king is seen as
Absolutely.
the connection to God, right? So the king
Yes.
is the king is the father and the like steward of the land, but he's
Hmm.
also like this sort of white pillar that is connected to uh, whatever you see as God.
You're
And
absolutely right. The king has one foot in the earth and he has
mm,
one foot in the heavens.
mhm,
Um, when he is in his when he is in his fullness, and
yeah,
his the space around him is regenerative. Flowers are growing in his kingdom, life
mhm,
is blossoming, people are connected, right in his
mhm,
kingdom,
yep,
life is flourishing, and he has this ability to bring order into his kingdom. There's
mhm,
order, there's reciprocity, right, there's
yep,
balance.
mhm,
That only comes because he has one foot on earth and the other foot is receiving, right? Like this is the part of the magician that is like on. It's like connected to my kingdom should serve something more than me.
uh-huh,
The kingdom that only serves the king is doomed to fail, in my opinion.
mhm, mhm,
Right? It'll move into its shadows because it's not going to go his way one day, right? But if you're
yep,
serving something greater than you, then you answer only to that. And people pick up on that.
yep, yep,
They know that what you're bringing them is for the good of all
mm,
in the land. And that could be, if your kingdom is you, your wife, and a couple of children, then your decision making is for the good of all. It's never
mhm,
just about you.
yes, yeah. And so just to bring it back to the work that you do with men, this really it makes so much sense to me now, guys are like, well, I want to be a king. How do I become a king in my life? Well, start with your own house, right? Start with your bedroom, as Jordan Peterson says, make your bed,
Mm-hmm.
become the king of your bedroom. Uh, and do this embodiment work. Take care of sort out the nuts and bolts of your life. Take care of your physical body, um, and you need a connection to something bigger than yourself. You need a higher power, as they say in 12-step programs, because
Right.
that spiritual connection, whatever that is for you, whether it's shamanism, animism, uh, a religious connection, something that connects you to that higher place,
Yeah.
that because that rounds out your the king in you.
Yeah. And I really want to propose this, this thing. Like, sometimes it sounds like you need to go outside to find God or your spiritual, like, I call her the great mother. That's just my way of communicating about that aspect of the divine.
Hmm.
So in my it's you don't need to go outside looking for this connection. As a matter of fact, once you remove once this temple body becomes clear of preoccupations, right? If you have fears and you have resentments, you're preoccupied. If you're out of integrity, you're preoccupied unconsciously, right?
Mm.
So there's a myriad of different um, things that could be preoccupying this energetic body. But once this body is cleared, once some shit has moved, the connection just happens. You don't have to go looking for something. You start to become aware of this connection. Maybe it starts off like a little candle, like within the belly. Maybe it's just like a little, or in the heart, and you just like you can sense it. But if you spend time with that, if you work on nurturing that space, if you start to listen from that space, if you start to take action from that space, what happens is the flicker of light becomes bigger, it becomes stronger, it becomes easier to listen to, it becomes easier to get to, it becomes easier to lean on. The attachments start to fall off. Now you're in relationship. It's an incredibly personal experience,
Yeah.
right? But it is your birthright to feel that connection. It is within every man, woman, and child.
Hmm.
And all you need to do is look at children. They're fucking fully connected.
Yeah.
They come out connected,
Hmm.
and as it happens, we need to find our way back
Uh-huh.
home
Yeah.
to that connection.
Hmm.
Society we live in, and the stresses of life, and you know mortgages and so forth.
And some of this work can be done alone. Clearly, some of the work that you're guiding men to do is very personal, and they need to go out into nature by themselves. Um, but what what part of it must be done with other men?
Yeah. So the part that's done alone is the development of your own daily practice. Your daily practice should be a reflection of where you sense you're going. So I sense that, I'm creating this global community of hosting hundreds of men's group across the world. If that's where I'm going, my daily practices should be developing certain traits and senses about myself that lead me in that direction. So my
Uh,
daily practice is uniquely mine, that move me towards where I'm going. Okay.
hmm.
Sometimes you can feel into that for the day. Sometimes you can feel into that for the week. Sometimes you can feel into that for the month. And you decide what the daily practice is. You want it to be alive. Your personal practice, you want to be alive. That's your personal work
Hmm.
on your own. In regards to how community can support, think of it this way. If you were able to overcome, let's say, an emotional trauma, you would have.
Right.
You would have. So maybe you need to feel somebody else's container that's a little bit stronger that you can relax into, where you can explore, where you can discover, where you can allow, where you can strengthen your own capacity to shepherd your own feminine emotional body, let's say.
Mm, mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that will require a container that's bigger than you. Maybe it's a container of a community. Maybe you need to make some reconciliations in your life, and you need the counsel and reflection of men that are not in the nuances of your experience, but they have depth of perception and they can give you clear feedback.
Mm-hmm.
I really believe that every man needs to be a part of a men's group.
Yeah.
Um, and that's why I am open source. I am open source. Like, I want other men's groups to thrive. And if, because I'm in the business of fulfilling my soul's calling, right? So my soul's calling, I claim this, truth for myself is to bring 100 million men to the feet of the great mother. Impossible to accomplish, but I have to empower other people
Others.
to support the healing of this fabric.
Yeah.
So I'm all about empowering other men in their programs, and as a result, I get invited to different men's groups to help them run something or to
Mm-hmm.
support in some way, to come talk, whatever. And I'm just like, all yes, all open book,
Yeah.
in regards to that.
Yeah, I'm really excited to do more with you, Amir, and to have an in-person experience with you.
Mm,
I definitely want to talk about that. But
mm,
I really appreciate what you're sharing about the need for a container larger than what you can create on your own. It makes so much sense to me, especially after um, spending so much time in men's groups, men's weekends, and even other things like ayahuasca ceremonies,
mm-hmm.
these spiritual peyote ceremonies. You can take a substance on your own and go to a certain place. But if you have somebody in the room who you trust, who has more experience than you, who has gone further than you then have the ability to go somewhere that you couldn't go on your own. This is
Yeah,
what a ceremony is for. This is what rituals are for. It creates a safety and an openness in us that does not occur outside of that space.
mm-hmm.
It's ancestral. It's like built into our how we're made up, and so the men's circle being a sacred container is also that.
Yeah, and men, I get a lot of teachers that, not a lot, but I get a good number of teachers that just need to come and receive. They're holding
Yeah.
so much,
Mhm.
you know. And I too, I have a couple of groups that I belong to receive my nourishment. We have to be like, open vessels. We have to nourish ourselves. We have to find the right nourishments, and to be able to be at optimum for what we're being called to do.
Mhm. Mhm.
You know, so I really appreciate when men come, that are holding men's groups, and they come for a reprieve. They just like, hey man, I'm going to take 2 hours and sit in your container,
Uh-huh.
you know, and explore and receive.
Yeah, I really loved coming to your group, and I highly recommend that men check that out. It's a drop-in style. You basically buy a ticket for a particular week that you're going to go, and you show up. And it's on Wednesdays. And I just started a circle for men dealing with addiction. It's an addiction
Mm,
recovery focused circle. It happens at the
mm-hmm,
same time as
mm-hmm.
your Wednesdays. Um, so I wish I could go more, but uh, you know, on the topic of addiction recovery,
Yeah.
I'm curious how you understand addiction and how you understand recovery. I'm would really
Great
love to hear your
question.
perspective.
Oh, yeah. I'm not sure if you knew, but I was in the program for 24 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember
And
you told me that when
we talked
we
about
did our
that.
first
Okay.
call. Yeah.
Yeah. So I like even to this day, if somebody comes to me with like, deep addiction, my first place that I send them to is the program. I mean, the
Yeah.
program is designed to bring this a confronting, um, uh, you know, confronting situation to a head, so you can realize that you need something greater than yourself to move
Uh-huh.
past it, right?
Hmm.
And then it lays out through the steps certain introspective work, so you can get a different paradigm of what the problem really is.
Hmm.
And then ultimately, you move towards, you know, clearing resentments, clearing fears, getting back into very, I have pulled uh, um, some of my, the work that I offer in my 4 month program from the recovery field because it works, right?
Yeah. There's like a cleansing and an emptying of the stuff that you've been carrying, the pain,
Yeah,
the resentment, the hurt.
yeah. So
Mhm.
I'm a big proponent of the 12 step movement and program. I personally, after 24 years, um, was experiencing a contraction of my spiritual life and experience. So for me, I really believed in the principle of spiritual expansion that the recovery program really promotes. And for me, I had to bring that relationship to a completion at 24 years. But I'm a very rare case. I also started to move into the realm of working with plant medicine. And for me, I know many men that are working with plant medicine that are in recovery, complete non-issue. But personally,
Yep.
for me, I needed to birth something new.
Yeah.
And so that relationship came to a completion, and I kind of um, ventured more into shamanism and to just kind of primitive wisdom,
Yeah.
and that has really influenced and enlivened my spiritual life more than ever.
Hmm.
But that
Hmm.
was for me. That was uniquely for me.
Yeah.
I think the AA program is absolutely the number one go to for acute addiction issues. That's a phenomenal container, right? I mean,
Yeah.
meetings. What
Yep.
are meetings but containers, right?
Yep.
And it really, AA really gave me the foundation of understanding, the importance of um, letting go of what no longer served me and to make myself available to a new paradigm of living.
Uh-huh.
And that
Yeah.
came through years of work, years of 10 steps and fear lists and
Hmm. Hmm.
calling my sponsor all the time. But
Hmm.
yeah, I hope that answers your question. I have big
Yeah.
respect for the recovery field.
Yeah, I think it does. And I think the first thing I ever really surrendered myself to consciously as a, not as a child, I was still young though, was the 12 step program and, trusting that, um, that program could get me out of the very lost,
Hmm.
confused, hurting place that I was in. And it did.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so, yeah, I take a very we're on the same train tracks, man. If people are open and willing to do 12 step work, uh, that is what I advise. And for as long as it feels necessary for you, and as long as you're growing. I said this last night that there's this perspective, and it's a very 12 step perspective that you're either growing or you're regressing. You're not ever really staying the same because nature doesn't really have that in mind.
Hmm.
And so if you stop growing in that program, what think deeply, feel deeply, into yourself of what are you actually looking for? What is your next level of growth? And listen to that
Yeah.
call. And I resonate with what you did stepping away, because I did the same thing after 15
Mm,
years,
I
right?
see.
And
And it
it
was
is a
really
risk.
hard. Was it hard? I mean, it was really
Yeah.
hard for me to make that move
Yeah.
because it's like my identity was so like, and
Yeah.
it gave me so many gifts. I mean, there was just so many positive things, but yet, it's like, yeah, it's like a marriage that is complete, but nobody wants to say it's complete. It's like,
Yep.
it's like fuck, like, we've been together for 20 years. I like, but it's done, like it's complete. So
Yep.
it was a similar thing for me. I really, for me, I had to. It was an unpopular choice. Um, Many of my AA friends, I'm sad to report, don't really reach out to me anymore. Like there's
Yep.
that connection, that community. I've created a whole other community,
Yep.
which is alive and thriving, and but I'm a little sad about that, right? I'm a little sad
Yep.
about that, um, but it was uniquely the right thing for me to do, and I trusted that. It was like the flame was little at that point, but
Yep.
it was guiding me, and I stepped into the unknown, um, and I found my path. I
Mm-hmm.
found my path that has really enlivened my teaching,
Yeah.
enlivened my spiritual connection, enlivened my clarity of my work in the world, and really empowered me beyond anything I had experienced in those 24 years. And my impact is a direct result of that choice.
Yes.
Because before I made that choice, I was maybe sponsoring one guy here, or maybe I was just going to meetings to go. This was like it's like for me that felt like so like I knew this was not it for me. Like I knew my
Mm-hmm.
impact was deeper,
Yep.
and so I really had to listen to that and make a very unpopular choice. Like in that
Yep.
community, it's said often. It's like if you leave, you're gonna
Die.
die or go insane. I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, well, I'm actually
Yep.
thriving.
Jails, institutions, or death.
Jails,
That's what's coming.
institutions are dead. Yeah.
Yeah, I very much relate to that. I lost a lot of friends. I didn't have people directly call me and say like, "Hey, I'm done with you." I just
No,
stopped
no,
hearing
they
from
just
them.
yeah, yeah, me too. Me too. And
Yeah.
I get it. Maybe it's weird in there, maybe it's a cognitive dissonance to see someone leave and grow.
That's the thing. You kind of if you're in a if you're in a place that says uh you know, if you don't stay here, you're going to die. If you don't stay inside this compound, you will die out there in the forest, right? If
Yeah.
you're in that place, when someone goes out there and survives, you need to like,
It
or
fucks up your
thrives even.
thinking.
Yeah, you have to just shut it out, because it's not uh because you want to stay in your
Well,
in
yeah.
what's working for you, right?
And there's so much demonization of the mind, like you know like you
Yeah.
can't trust your mind, like
Yes.
like, and I'm all for. I know I'm not my mind. I know that my mind is a tool that I use, and I understand some people are incredibly mired by their thinking, and they need that much structure, and they need that much support, and I did too for
Yep.
over 2 decades.
Me too.
2 decades, 24 years. And then there was an inkling in my heart that was saying it's time to move.
Hmm.
And I did, and I have to say, in my very kind of unique, maybe it's I don't know, experience, it really served me.
Hmm.
It really served me to go
Yeah.
into the unknown, to go into the unknown because I really was thirsty for a deeper connection to the divine. And
Hmm.
I have a new found understanding and experience of it,
Yeah.
you know, that I did 7 years ago.
Yeah. Well, I'm grateful for you that you did that. Uh, and I'm grateful for all the men that you're reaching because of that choice that you made.
Mm.
Um, you're no doubt a very different person with a very different impact now, because you made that choice. So thank you for doing that.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
and I just want to close by saying I have again the utmost respect for the recovery program, and I have a lot of men that are in the recovery program that come into to my space, and a lot of men that aren't. But I just, it was a challenging transitional period, but it was the right
mhm,
move for me.
mhm, mhm. Well, man, before we close, Embodied Masculine is where people can find you.
Mhm.
Instagram, Amir Khalighi. I will share that link so that people know how to
Yeah,
spell Khalighi. Does Khalighi
yeah, it's
have
just
a
at
meaning?
Khaligi.
At Khalighi. Yeah.
Yeah, Khalir is it's an old Persian word, and I believe it's like higher knowledge. I think something like that
Mm-hmm.
refers to, but it's
Mm-hmm.
a family name.
Ah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, it's my last name. It's my last
Yeah.
name, family
Yeah.
name, my
Great.
father's side. Yeah, it's just at Khaligi. It's at Khaligi and
Yeah. Got it.
embodiedmasculine.com. If anyone's curious about the flavor of men's work that we
Mm-hmm.
put out into the world.
Definitely recommend checking it out. You do weekly sessions that guys can join in to meet you and some of your community and to do the practices that you and I talked about on this call. And then you have larger, longer, more involved trainings that you do with men and retreats. I think that the retreats you do only with the men who have done your training programs. Is that right?
No, no, we have public
Okay.
retreats.
Okay.
Sometimes we'll mix the public retreats with the program retreats. We have a retreat coming up in Ojai at the end of this month, which I believe is sold out. So there's a wait list for that. But yeah, mostly we run different programs. I run facilitator training programs to help men that want to do like teach men's work.
Mm-hmm.
That program's almost complete. And then I run a couple of 4 month programs throughout the year that we talked about earlier about cleaning this vessel so they can start to
Yeah.
create with intention and from that heart space. And that has a retreat associated with it. And then online courses, we have an intro to shamanism course that's starting on Saturday. And
Yeah.
we have,
Right. Uh-huh.
yeah, yeah, there's a lot going on. There's a huge list of
So good.
offerings. So people can just go and check it out. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for mentioning all
Yeah. I mean, the facilitators training is very attractive to me when I saw that. I saw the work that you've put into it, how clearly you outline what you do and what you're there for and how long it is. Like you have a way of covering details and aesthetic, Amira, that is, it's, I'm just going to say it. There's not a lot of that in the world. You have a really sharp attention to detail that I really appreciate. And,
that.
uh, I can tell that you have decades of facilitation behind you. So,
Mm,
for
mm,
guys who are interested in that and facilitators training, check that out. And we'll put a link to that in the notes as well.
mm,
Thank you, Amir, for having this conversation with me, for sharing about men's
mm,
embodiment work, for going deep with me. And I think there was so much value here for guys. It's worth listening to multiple times. And we're going to chop it up and use it as much as we can because this was really, really
mm.
valuable information, valuable downloads from you. So thank you.
It's my pleasure. It was really a wonderful conversation to share with you.
And I want to say thank you for sitting in the sauna. So
Gee, look at me. My
Amir
God.
is sweating because I asked him to
Yeah.
turn off his air conditioner because it was making some noise in the background, and I'm a freak about good audio quality. So he's been sitting here in the sauna, sweating his butt off in the office for the last hour, in the name of having a high quality recording for you folks. So thank you, Amir, for doing that as well. I appreciate that. All right, brother. Until next time.